Yo, what's up? It's the Buff Missionary again. And a lot of people don't know this about me. Guess I'm in the seminary now, so a lot of people, they know that aspect. But way back in the day, undergrad, I was a business student and I studied accounting. My whole thing, well, I'll get into that story a little bit later. But the point is, there's a lot of language there. You're talking about price, cost, supply, demand, wages, things you can earn. There's a lot of talk there, and I see a lot of the same kind of language here in this last little segment, these last couple paragraphs of Steps to Christ. It's interesting, of the first chapter of Steps to Christ. It's interesting. There's definitely economic understanding that goes on here in this last little section. So let's jump right into it. It starts out by saying this: the price, here you go, paid for our redemption, the infinite sacrifice of our Heavenly Father in giving His Son to die for us, should give us exalted conceptions of what we may become through Christ. A high price, qualified here as an infinite sacrifice. Okay, as the inspired Apostle John beheld the height, depth, and breadth of the Father's love towards the perishing race, he was filled with adoration and reverence, and failing to find suitable language in which to express the greatness and tenderness of this love, he called upon the world to behold it. Behold, what manner of love the Father has bestowed upon us, that we should be called sons of God. So, this infinite sacrifice, this price that God was willing to pay in Christ, was to buy something. It was to buy or to redeem humanity's status as children of God. Now, what's the value that you put on that? How do you quantify the value of what it means to be viewed as a sinless child of God? What's the price? It says infinite here. I mean, that's the best that we can do when we think about it. But there's an implication of something else that we have to understand when we're hearing about this from God's perspective. What a value this places upon man, mankind, womankind, childrenkind. See, we hear this story about this high level of value that God has for us as His creation. And we get it. For God, it makes sense because we read the story and it kind of is what it is. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, we know how the story goes. But I think sometimes we stop at God's perspective. Well, God is love. He's supposed to be love, and that's why He did what He did. But we never think of how our perspective should shift based on the understanding of God's perspective. If what God is doing is placing such a high value on humanity, what is our perception of our value? Again, we're talking about this economy, not just in a business sense, but in a life sense. And when you look at, man, you could take anything today, whether it's NFTs is a big one, right? Bitcoin, Ethereum, these types of things that we have going on, cryptocurrency, all this stuff. I remember talking with my brother about it, and I couldn't understand how it worked, why there was so much value put on it, and how people were able to capitalize and make so much money from it. For me, it was absolutely useless because I didn't have an interest in that. I wasn't doing anything with it. But for him and what he understood about it, it was more valuable, so he was willing to put in more to capitalize on that opportunity. NFTs. A lot of time it's just a picture. It's some random art thing that, let's be honest, half the things, let's say for the basketball NFTs, you can go on YouTube and watch the highlights. For some of these random NFTs that's just an art picture, you can screenshot that. You don't have to pay so much to get this NFT thing, and now you have this super valuable commodity. What is it that makes those things so valuable? It's because people are willing to put so much into it. It's because they're willing to pay for it. And the higher someone is willing to pay for something, the more perceived value it has. You think of art, classic art, and even modern art, some of the most highly sought after things. It's what you see adorning the houses of the rich and famous. Art, paintings, these types of things. And you might think, well, yeah, it's just a picture and it sits there on the wall, and you might be able to find a digital copy and appreciate it just as much. But the perceived value that these people have put on these objects drives the price up. And again, the higher the price, the more valuable that painting is perceived to be. Even ones that sometimes look to us as absolute ridiculous, like, man, all they did was just throw a bunch of different color paints on the wall. I could do that. But because it's a certain person who did it, because they have this clout that goes with them, the price goes up. The value goes up. The perception of how valuable this thing is continues to go up, and people are willing to pay more and more and more for it. And yet, for all of those things that people in society today put such a high value on, there's not one thing that can't be sold at a price. There's a limit for everything. There's a number that you could put on anything that exists in society today, and somebody would step up to the plate, see that perceived value, and pay that price. But when it comes to you and when it comes to me, your value is infinite. Only God could pay that. In other words, the value that God saw fit to place on us is higher and worth more than anything that exists in all creation today. Yeah, I'm talking about you and I'm talking about me, flawed humanity. We don't look at ourselves the way that God sees us as so valuable. We don't look at others around us in the same way that God sees us and them. Wouldn't it change the way that we interact with others if we had this kind of perception, if we understood the value that was placed on us? How would we talk to ourselves if we put the same value on ourselves that God puts on us? Look at society today, social media, no one's good enough. Everyone's always trying to measure up to this, measure up to that. You see these people, oh, this must be the way to do it. You see those clothes, oh, I need to have that to be perceived as valuable by these people around me. Not with God. Not with God. Your value exists and is infinite just based on you being you. Whoever you are. That's all it's based on. Not how much like that person you look like. Not how many good things you do according to that person's perception. Not what church you go to. Not what music you listen to. Not what color your skin is. God doesn't care about that stuff as much as we think he does. His perception of value on humanity means that every single one of us is worth infinitely more than we think of ourselves. And we know this because of John 3:16. He gave his son to die for every single person, not just the ones who looked like him and acted like him. For every single person, and whoever believes that God could be that good, whoever believes that the sacrifice could be made for me, even though I'm a sinner, we can take advantage of that. And we can get a chance to live out what it really is to be viewed and perceived as that infinitely valuable, sinless child of God. That's amazing. That's amazing. We don't understand how that kind of economy works. It's hard for us to comprehend. And a lot of times it's simply unbelievable for many people, and they continue to live in the reality of their own perception of themselves. But there's a better perception that we should be aware of. There's a better perception that we should be willing to look at on ourselves, and it'll elevate us. It'll elevate us. Through transgression, the sons of man became subjects of Satan. Through faith in the atoning sacrifice of Christ, there it is, that faith you have to believe, the sons of Adam may become the sons of God. By assuming human nature, Christ elevates humanity. It's not that he's above us and just seeks to lord it above us because he's the perfect and sinless Son of God. He said, I'm going to bring all of y'all up with me. Christ is our example. When I see that example and I understand the value that God places on me and those around me, am I willing to have that same mentality for the people around me? Or am I content to stay in my safe place, in my high place, in my perfect place, even though I'm a sinner, thinking that I can't associate with these other people, thinking that I don't have the time or the space to deal with other people and their issues because I'm so good. And I don't want to be tainted by the other stuff that everyone else has going on. I want to stay perfect and I want to stay good. Come on now. Christ didn't do that. Why do we? Why do we? Fallen men are placed where, through connection with Christ, they may indeed become worthy of the name sons of God. It's because of that sacrifice, believing in that sacrifice, the perceived value that God has on us, the real value that he places on us, and the value that we can be able to see in ourselves, that we can be elevated through Christ to the status of sons of God. Such love is without parallel. Clearly, you think of all the things that have been sold, all the stories you hear, Twitter, whatever it is you hear about being sold and the value, NFTs, crypto, all this kind of stuff. You think of the prices that people have put on that, and you think, man, I would never pay that much for something like that. I don't see the value or the worth in that at all. And yet God came down here and said, you see those people that everyone thinks are trash and garbage? You see those people that messed up and continue to mess up every day? I'm willing to pay the highest price for them, just for a chance to bring them back into harmony with me so they can be my children again. Children of the heavenly King, precious promise, theme for the most profound meditation. Think about that. It blows my mind thinking about it right now. It's hard for me to understand. I'm just trying to explain and work out the possibility. And just thinking of someone who could possibly view me in that way. Man, it's like I have to step my game up in the way that I view myself and the way that I view other people. How can I get caught thinking down on myself and others when this kind of value's been placed on me by somebody so much better than me? It's amazing. The matchless love of God for a world that did not love him. Wow. The thought has a subduing power upon the soul and brings the mind into captivity to the will of God. It's very hard for us to see the value in people that we don't care about and the people that we're unwilling to sacrifice for. That's hard for us. And yet God does it with so many people, even those that have cursed him. The more we study the divine character in the light of the cross, the more we see mercy, tenderness, and forgiveness blended with equity and justice. Whoa, what a combination there. A lot of people look at Christians as being soft because they say, oh, you're just going to accept everything. You're just going to give mercy on everybody. You're just going to be tender and you're going to forgive. You can't have any issue with someone who does anything against you. But in God, we see something different. We see mercy, tenderness, and forgiveness blended with equity and justice. We don't just see justice in the hammer dropping. We don't just say, all right, well, this is fair. I don't care about your context. I don't care about your story. I don't care about your situation. You get this much and the other person gets that much too, because that's equity. We don't see that from God. We see mercy. We see tenderness mixed with the equity and justice. It's hard for us to understand. But the more we think about it, and the more clearly we discern the innumerable evidences of a love that is infinite and a tender pity surpassing a mother's yearning sympathy for her wayward child, maybe then can we appreciate what God has done for us and the implications it has on how we should live, the grace that we should live with, the mercy that we should live with, the justice that we can live with, standing tall and being fair to everyone around us, not just the people who match with our own agendas and who think like us, look like us, etc. And I guess we can close with this. The whole chapter is entitled God's Love for Man, and it finishes talking about how a mother's yearning sympathy for her child doesn't compare. When you think about mothers and their children, and I know this is not a perfect society we live in, so you can't always say this, but more often than not, when parents have their children, they feel this difference, this heightened level of responsibility that comes over them, like, man, whatever it takes for this little person, I'm willing to do anything for them. Anything. Those of you who are parents, new parents, and even you've been for a while, you know what I'm talking about. And yet, that same feeling that you have for your children, God has it for you times 1 billion. And you know how it is. Even if your children are messing up and not doing the things you want them to do, you still feel that for them. How much more so God for us, even when we're messing up. Don't believe the lie that just because you mess up, God doesn't care about you anymore. That's Satan trying to throw you off and mess you up. The Bible doesn't teach that. Inspiration doesn't teach that. God's love for us is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Regardless of what we do, he's going to keep on loving us. Infinite sacrifice, an infinite price paid, because your value, and I hope in your perception you can begin to see this, your value is matchless in his eyes, and he wants us to be able to see and understand that too. That's why he gave us Christ. That's why that sacrifice was made. Hey, chapter 1. It's only 13 chapters in this book, so we're gonna have some fun and get enlightened with this while we can, but don't miss it. And I encourage you, go back and read through it on your own. Like I said before, I try to read through this book once a year because there's just that much value in it for me. So yeah, like, subscribe, and share, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.